Welcome everybody to this new edition of Data Talks. I'm here with Jesús Crespo. Jesús is a dear friend and also has a big affiliation with World Data Lab, and he also is the head of economics at the Vienna University of Business and Economics. Welcome to the show, Jesús.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Yeah. Jesús, you are, at least in our field, a well-known professor. We call you some of the person who makes data come alive and data sing. Tell us a bit about how you started. Why did you study economics, and why did you get fascinated by forecasting, which is one of your specialities?
Sure. Yes. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my childhood. I was born and raised in Sevilla, in southern Spain, and I was actually always very interested in teaching. I was giving private classes to students already when I was like 14, 15 and earning my money on the side. So it appeared very clear to me that eventually I would become a teacher or a school teacher, or basically work in something related to academia. And I think it was in the but last year in school where basically my interests moved in the direction, on the one hand, of mathematics and on the other hand of philosophy. And I thought that economics was kind of the perfect convex combination of these two topics, which actually it is. So it basically gave me what I was expecting of it. And that's why I decided to study economics, basically because of my interest in two things which are not directly economics. On the one hand, mathematics, on the other hand, philosophy. Then I did my undergrads in Sevilla. And it appeared to me very quickly that actually, if I was to become a teacher, why not a teacher of older persons instead of small kids who are knowledge? I mean, it's a well-known fact that they are more annoying than the older ones, even when the older ones can be also very annoying. So I decided that I would pursue an academic career. Then I basically was planning to do my doctoral degree in London, but a Viennese girl crossed my way. That Viennese girl is now my wife and the mother of my kids, and I decided to go to Vienna instead. So I got a grant at the Institute for Advanced Studies. I spent 2 years in a postgraduate program at the Institute for Advanced Studies, and then I did my doctorate at the University of Vienna, and I was a postdoc researcher at the University of Vienna. And yeah, the rest is history. Then I went to Innsbruck, where I got my first professorship. And I got back to Vienna as a professor at the Vienna University of Economics and Business in 2010. So it's already 15 years ago. So time flies. Yeah.
Wow, 15 years ago. And we'll come to this, the moment when we met, which was actually the beginning of your tenure in Vienna.
Yes.
Glad you were here. That's why our path crossed. A part of these 15 years, I think you also, that's quite remarkable for then and still young professor, you taught a number of big talents. And quite well known, right? Max Rose is one of your PhD students, also Wolf Reuter, recent deputy finance minister of Germany. There was. How did that happen, and tell us about those interactions with others?
I've been very lucky when it comes to the students that I have had in front of me. Well, first of all, it's part of the fun of my job also to encounter such excellent young people. And you're right. I mean, I had the pleasure of teaching. You mentioned Max Rosa. Max Rosa was my student actually in Innsbruck. He was one of the first students of the Master in Economics in Innsbruck when we created the degree. And I mean, by what I know, about what he has told me, my class on economic growth was very central to his kind of getting fascinated by the progress that we have seen in the world over the last decades or over the last centuries, and was a bit of the spark that then led to his creating our world in data at the University of Oxford. I brought actually Max to Vienna, trying to kind of get him to be part of my team. He was part of my team for some time, but then he moved to Oxford to greater greater targets. But we're still in contact. I'm very happy about that. Wolf, who you mentioned, was a PhD student here at the department. I did not supervise him directly. It was a colleague of ours, Harald Badinger, who supervised him, but he was a very dear colleague of ours, and we're still in contact. Florian Huber, who's also a professor of econometrics or of economics, but with a specialization in econometrics in Salzburg, is a very dear friend of mine and also was my student. Max Cassi, who's also a professor on econometrics and machine learning methods in Oxford, took his first econometrics class with me in Vienna. So yeah, I'm actually, when the disciples get better than the masters, that's something that the masters should be happy about, and I'm very proud and also very happy to consider these people somehow my my students, and then eventually my friends partly.
Oh, you should be super proud, and obviously there is also a trend, an aspect that concerns World Data Lab. I love, by the way, how you described economics before as the marriage of math and philosophy. That's the first time I heard it presented this way, and that's, I think, what we subscribe as well when you think of the economics, that the impact that economics should make in the world. And so, yeah, you also obviously help to fuel also the data team that's here. And Kati Fens is one of your PhD students, and student has been almost for a decade since the beginning of WDL. Do you remember the first time when we met and when you outlined some of the vision for this data models that we
Yeah. I remember even the times before we met because I was sitting in your office in Nairobi. While working there for a mission of the World Bank. They basically gave me your office because you were not there.
Yes.
So our first contact was actually me sitting in your office and having a look at the photographs of you and your family working on your computer, on your desk with my computer, because that was the office that was free in the Nairobi office of the World Bank. Then I got to know you a bit through your blog, actually, where you were having a look at basically global development issues with a focus on Africa. And then we started eventually to work together also on a blog entry, if you remember, on the demographic dividend in Kenya.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Vienna, and of course the rest is also history. I believe the first time we actually met face to face, we discussed about what then became Population.io. So we discussed about how to model and how to visualize, which was something that you had a particular interest in, basically populations or global populations, and how to find your place in the world in some kind of birth chronology. And if I interpreted it properly, that was also kind of the spark that eventually then created the World Data Lab in the longer run.
Indeed, that was the spark. And then the second one was with Homi, that you know well. We're talking about the poverty clock, but only population now got us to that level. And I remember when I had the idea to line up everybody by age. And then you said, yeah, I know how to do it. I know the guy. And also, do you want their addresses and their birth dates? I mean, their addresses and their names as well. And so that was a quite a nice anecdote. Also, it shows your positive spirit, or this can-do spirit. Jesus, let's move into econometrics today, as I would call it. You want to tell, obviously, we talk a lot about these, technical terms, from regression trees to Bayesian model averaging. One of your strengths is also to present clearly and convincingly. Just explain the audience, the common audience, how does actually forecasting work practically?
Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, the term forecasting is broad enough so that you can interpret it like crystal ball type of methods to actually how we understand it like serious, rigorous statistical methods that allow you to basically discover patterns in the data on the time dimension. So you basically learn out of the changes and dynamics that you observe in past data, some of the driving factors of future developments in those phenomena or variables that you are interested in. So basically what we do is to try to understand from the past how the present may lead to the future. And this we do in principle. The simplest way of doing that is just by concentrating on a single phenomenon. Say you're interested in forecasting precipitation, weather precipitation, so rain. You might as well just have a look at past rainfall data and then try to understand seasonal patterns in a way in which they would help you understand how much it's going to rain next week. At the same time, we know that rain might be affected by many other factors, so we might also include those past dynamics of those variables into the equation, and then we're basically trying to disentangle patterns which are not anymore in one dimension, but in many dimensions. How do different phenomena interact with each other in a way in which we can learn something about how tomorrow will look like? Now, as you can imagine, and as we know, some of these phenomena are really complicated. They're very complex. So that means that these linkages that we eventually find and these persistence patterns that we observe over time, they also change. And they change in ways which are sometimes very difficult to predict themselves. And the cool thing about statistics and econometrics is that we have invested quite a lot of work, of intellectual work and of time in trying to understand how to also understand those changes themselves, the way in which patterns and linkages change over time. And nowadays, thanks to also to computational power, the computational power that we have gained over the last decades, we are able to model phenomena which are very complex on their own, which have patterns that are changing over time, which have relationships to other variables that are changing over time, thanks to mathematics, after all. Yeah.
Wow, thanks so much, Jesus, for outlining this in a crisp but in a very deep way. Given we are also forecasting social phenomenon, economic activity, poverty, what would you respond to people who says there's so much uncertainty out there, the world is in turmoil?
Yeah.
How do you manage the uncertainty?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, all of the models that we entertain, all the models that we work with, they cannot assume that you're going to be able to break the code that would give you the exact number of, say, poverty in the following year. Because we cannot even explain history to that level of perfection without creating ridiculously over parameterized models. So we understand also as modelers the uncertainty which is behind our exercise, our modeling exercise. And the cool thing about it is that we can quantify that uncertainty as well, and we can communicate it in the form of sometimes, confidence intervals or fan charts that try to visualize also the fact that we are not predicting that a particular number is going to realize in the future, but we are predicting one number of a series of numbers, some of them may be more likely than others. And modern statistics and modern econometrics is actually able to do that sometimes in very fancy manners, sometimes in very visually attractive manners. And we should also be very explicit about it and very humble, if necessary, about it. And, in some cases, people require the best number you can give them. But in some of the cases, people are also happy to get likely intervals in which a particular phenomenon could realize itself. And we know how to do that as well, thanks to basically all the probabilistic knowledge that we have over centuries.
So here's another question in that area. If you think of our kids, you mentioned them, and if the generation would now study economics or mathematics, as some of our kids do, how do you see the balance between the complexity and the deeper growing models and the combination of economics and math, but also the need for simplicity at the same time? How would you advise the new generation?
Yeah, not only the new generation, also the older generation. Actually, the main aim of scientific discovery, of science as such, is simplification. Simplification is key. And simplification always comes with costs. Swimming in the complexity of life is a wonderful experience when it comes to creating poetry, when it comes to creating music, when it comes to creating art in general. However, when it comes to creating science, the last thing you want to do is just to enjoy complexity or just swim in complexity. What you want to do is simplify. What you want to do is to get to the bare bones of the most important relationships that you can filter out of the data that you see or of the phenomenon that you're interested in. Finding that balance between not being naive in what you are, or in the way in which you're trying to model a complex phenomenon, and not swimming in complexity, that is the art of science. That is exactly what distinguishes good from not so good science. And in particular, as a social scientist, the phenomena that we try to explain are so complex that actually we tend to err on the side of making our models too complicated. So actually, I would call for, I would basically raise the flag of Occam's razor and this idea of trying to get models which are as simple as they get, but still having some kind of predictive power. So in the end, the big progress that we have observed in science and in scientific discovery over the last centuries, it all has built on basically the most important scientific principle, which is precisely Occam's razor, this idea that if you have two explanations for the same phenomena and both of them explain the phenomenon equally well, then you should go for the simplest explanation. Mm-hmm. And with the simplest explanation, we mean the one that requires the least assumptions. And in that respect, the development of computational power, computational methods, the exponential growth of machine learning methods, artificial intelligence methods of the last decades should actually make us be able to do that simplification even better. So even when it might appear to the public that all of these methods are just making our life more complicated, they should actually make our life simpler in terms of understanding reality with simpler type of models. We economists also look up to physicists as basically how one should try to approach reality or our dream when it comes to creating a model for reality. And the gravity model is not that complicated, also not that complicated to communicate. So that's kind of the dream that one would have. Yeah.
Wow, so well put. And I guess the analogy, even what we're doing now, right, is very sophisticated in computer engineering, but the front end needs to be simple. People need to relate to that, and that's very much close to what we want to do at World Data Lab, to communicate data very clearly with the uncertainty around, but be highly relevant. With that one, Jesus, let's talk about the future. You're also one of the participants and architects in the shared socioeconomic pathways. Just tell us a bit, and then I think it was the latest update, how that machinery works and what we can expect by 2050.
Yeah, this is actually part of the interdisciplinary efforts that basically some econometricians, some economists are doing in terms of cooperating with other disciplines in order to try to understand the challenges that, in this case, climate change is going to bring with itself. The shared socioeconomic pathways, the famous SSPs, are basically a set of scenarios for the future which come together with a series of projections of socioeconomic variables. I have been mostly involved in trying to create internally consistent scenarios for the future of GDP, of gross domestic product, and therefore of income. And then, of course, once that you have those, then hand in hand, you can create socioeconomic projections for variables related to, say, political variables, say variables related to poverty, variables related to income inequality, because you can exploit the linkages that income has with other aspects of the socioeconomic world. The shared socioeconomic the shared socioeconomic pathways, they are not forecasts in the way that we usually understand them. They are projections. So in that respect, they are basically science fiction futures. They are quantified science fiction futures in a space in which you can vary the challenges that the world is going to encounter in terms of climate change mitigation and adaptation to climate change. It's basically the framework. And that framework basically allows to decompose that space into several type of subspaces in which those challenges are relatively high, relatively low, or medium. And with that, we create 5 different scenarios that then represent each one of those shared socioeconomic pathways, each one of them being more or less realistic, but where realism not being the interesting dimension which you want to talk about. You also want to think about worst case scenarios. You want to think about how large challenges can be, because in the end, it's going to be very complicated to create a proper forecast of, say, GDP per capita in Tanzania for the year 2080. That's not the aim. The aim is, how do we think about a potential Tanzania under several assumptions and in a set of scenarios in a year such as the year 2080. And that implies that basically you have to abstract away from many things, and that you have to also receive a lot of information from other disciplines. We're working there together with demographers, geographers, mathematicians, of course, climate researchers, in order to try to understand how the future of our planet could look like. And it's been a fascinating research agenda that is still going on, and that it has had the interesting spillover that it has found its way to policymakers. Actually, policymakers, in particular, policymakers that are working on climate policy, they have understood the language behind those shared socioeconomic pathways, and we have created something like a common language to speak to them.
Well, thanks for that presentation, Jesus. And obviously, one key element for me and for us is this consistency aspects, right? They're self-consistent, and that's what also we convey to our clients, that this always has to add up. There's only a certain number of people in Tanzania, a certain amount is in the middle class, and you can project under certain scenarios using all best possible data, the logical outcome. You mentioned already the key elements I want to pick up on: the climate change and also the GDP forecasting. Sometimes we feel a bit confronted by two extremes. One, obviously, people who are concerned and very depressed about the future and think with climate change things will have a different trajectory. But then there's also more the people from more the singularity space that said soon with AI everything will become hyper productive and we'll experience massive GDP growth. When I look at your scenarios, it's still a middle of the road, a normal 3% per year. How would you respond and navigate through these extremes when people think we are in new times now?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Let me emphasize again that the work that we are doing in terms of GDP projection is not meant to be a forecast. In that respect, we are creating future scenarios which build upon a series of assumptions. Most of those assumptions imply that you're not going to have disruptive technologies. Or that the disruptive technologies that you're going to have will have effects on production and on productivity that will not create breaks in the dynamics of these variables in the future. So in that respect, like you said, in particular, the middle of the road scenario that we have in the shared socioeconomic pathways, it represents precisely that, something like a middle of the road scenarios where existing trends that you have observed until now are projected to the future in a, let me again also emphasize the point you made, in an internally consistent manner that implies that the population dynamics that we observe in terms of changes in age structure, changes in education structure, and the overall trends in terms of institutional quality and technology, they are going to develop the way that you would expect them to develop if you don't expect a disruptive change. Now, the world does experience disruptive changes, which basically implies that these are not to be seen as forecasts. And the disruptive changes that the world has been experiencing until now, apart from a series of repeated hiccups, has implied that we have become more productive over time. So if you go back to industrialization, that being the big chunk of productivity increase, followed by, you name it, internet, artificial intelligence, computational power, not only the one that we use in statistical modeling, but also the one that we use for communicating right now. All of that has made us more productive over time. And it has made us more productive over time in a way in which you expect that to follow in the future. But none of the scenarios that you want to entertain for the future is going to include like a second industrial revolution that had such a disruptive effect. Mostly because we would not know how to time that in the future, and also because it would make our communication of that future very complicated. So we are willing and able and expecting surprises, but we don't. I don't think that it would do us good to actually force those surprises in our projection exercises.
Well,
so we are open. We are open for disruptive, hopefully positive disruptive effects of not only artificial intelligence but also many other future developments when it comes to how human ingenuity can make us, better over time or more productive over time.
And Jesus, if we turn it around and we listen to people who have more doomsday scenarios and think with climate change things, would come to an end if we exaggerate, what's your response? Why do you think the world will be a better place in 10 years compared to today?
Well, climate change is creating a whole lot of challenges. That's for sure the case. None of the challenges that climate change is creating is going to be solved by us giving up the trend of technological improvement and of kind of inborn human ingenuity that has led to productivity increases until now. So I don't see how any other type of doomsday scenario would be more realistic than to expect that we will, hopefully through policy, be able to mitigate some of the climate change that we will observe in the future. And most importantly, when mitigation is not anymore socially accepted or socially desirable by democratic states or by whoever has the last say, that at least we will adapt to climate change in a way in which we can still live happy lives in the future. This is not supposed to be a forecast, but much more a wishful thinking type of statement.
Yeah. With that, Jesus, we'll come to the final question, which is a tradition of this podcast, which is the favorite number. So, Jesus, what's your favorite number?
My favorite number? I have very strong opinions about my favorite number.
Tell us.
About numbers in general and about my favorite number in particular. My favorite number was always number 8.
Because?
Number 8 is, first of all, from a stylistic point of view, it's a beautiful number. I find it beautiful. It's all very subjective. And if you lay it down, it's infinity, which is also kind of cool. Yeah. It's like I said, it's a very round number. It's a nice cube of 2, and if that is an aspect that can bring beauty to a number, it's it's a Fibonacci number on top of that. Fibonacci numbers are also kind of cool, and they're also related to art and they're also related to nature. So in that respect, I'm a huge fan of number 8.
Jesus, it was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much. Number 8 it is. By the way, the L'Oreal the CMO had infinity, so you seem to be joined on the hip with her. So
yeah, like a standing infinity. Yeah.